One of the most common questions that we get on the channel is, can I play D&D with you guys?
And we really took that to heart this year at Gen Con, and we decided to run a epic D&D game for 60 players.
My name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. And today we're going to talk about the epic game that we ran at Gen Con in 2023.
There's a lot to discuss today, so let's get rolling.
Kelly and I went to Gen Con for the very first time last year in 2022. And ever since then, and really ever since we went to our first gaming convention at Origins in 2019, we've been thinking about how we can do something super cool with our community at a gaming convention in person.
One of the hardest parts for us is that conventions often only have 3 to 4 days. And we know that a lot of people want to play D&D with us, and we want to play D&D with a lot of people. But the options that we could think of were either to burn ourselves out by running 100 games in quick succession through the 3 or 4 days.
And I've done that at a convention before, and it's super exhausting. And by the end of it, I am not a good DM anymore.
Yeah, I think by the third or fourth game, I lose all of my traction that makes me a good DM, and I feel like I'm not giving people what they want from the experience of playing with me. So then Monty and I started talking, well, how do we play with more people in a bigger and better way? What's the way that we can incorporate D&D, us, and a whole room full of people? And that's when we started thinking of the D&D Epic.
Now, you might have heard of the notion of a D&D Epic before, because these have actually been events that have been run at gaming conventions for decades. They're very popular in the Dungeons & Dragons Adventures League. In short, an Epic game is a multi-table event. It's when anywhere from maybe 4 to, in some cases, hundreds of tables of D&D players involving as many dungeon masters as well all get together in a giant convention hall, and they all play the same adventure together. There's a lot of coordination involved and timing, because often one of the coolest things about a D&D Epic is that it involves a huge storyline where all the tables are working together towards a shared goal.
Examples of this can include a epic battle or a siege or even a heist, ways that you can incorporate many different tables trying to perform the same task. Now, it should be noted that when we say the same task, not every table is doing the exact same thing. If you're performing a siege, there might be multiple pathways that the players can go on and multiple different angles in which they're approaching the siege. And this way you split the tables up into different paths, as we call them, and they're all trying to complete a similar task, helping each other out along the way. When you watch those great war movies or great battles in your favorite fantasy or even sci-fi films, those great battles usually have different teams of people performing different tasks and operations within a grand battle. And that's kind of the idea that we want to bring to life in a D&D Epic.
We knew that to pull an event like this off, that we would need a lot of help. Obviously, with an Epic, we need a lot of great dungeon masters to run every table. So what are Kelly and I doing? Well, obviously, we'd be writing the adventure. But this is where we borrowed another idea that I ran into in a local game of D&D Adventures League. I remembered a campaign that I played during Season 7 of D&D Adventures League, the Tomb of Annihilation, where 2 of the head game masters, the organizer of the event, dressed up as Zastam, and I think there's a merchant in the D&D Adventures League, and they would go around to every table and either offer to sell magic items to the players, or in the case of Zastam, attack them. And I thought this was really cool, and could be the way for Kelly and I to go around to every table and get to play with everybody at this event. I could be a zombie dragon riding Lich, flying from table to table, attacking all the players.
And I wanted to bring one of my iconic heroes, Sebastian Crow, to the audience and be able to play with him and have little quips with the different party members. So I was going to help the players out by showing up as my cunning sorcerer, Sebastian Crow, and dropping a fireball or teleporting people around or just generally helping them out.
At this point, we realized we were going to need a lot of help organizing this event and putting things together. We got a lot of amazing people on our own team, like Jill and Joe and Kyle, who help us produce our live streams, as well as our partners, Kirsten and Shay, who volunteered to help us with all the organizational bits of this whole event. But we also realized that we would need some amazing game masters and maybe a few other special guest stars to join in.
So for our epic game, we decided that this felt more epic than just something the dungeon dudes needed to bring to life. And luckily, we do have some incredible friends in the community that we were able to call up and bring to the tables. We managed to get a hold of Ginny D, a very dear friend of ours, and Antonio from Pointy Hats and Will from D&D Shorts, who before this epic we actually hadn't met, but when we did meet them, they were incredible. We all got along amazing. We went out for dinner and drinks a couple of the nights before the epic just to kind of talk it all over, get to know each other. And by the time the epic rolled around, we all were really good friends and got to share that space, communicate with one another, and bring our zany characters to life as we interacted with the tables. It also meant that the players not only got to have their tables crashed by the dungeon dudes, but also all of these other amazing creators in the YouTube space. And that way the stage was kind of shared by all of us.
And of course, we needed help from some incredible game masters. And so we reached out to our Patreon community, and Jenny, Will, and Antonio reached out to theirs as well. And we recruited an elite team of 15 incredible game masters who we were able to get them their badges for Gen Con and a nice goodie bag in thanks for helping run this event. And we worked with them over a 2 or 3 week period to make pre-generated characters and play test the adventure. So in the weeks leading up to Gen Con, we wrote the adventure, and Kelly and I ended up running it 10 times in total for all the game masters, who I think every GM ended up playing the adventure twice to test it out. And it was such a fun time in the lead up to this with all of our amazing game masters, who many of whom are patrons of the show, gave us amazing feedback, and we really felt like we had this all together.
It was made even better by the fact that while we were planning this event, we ended up talking to some amazing other creators like 1985 Games and WizKids, who heard about the event and wanted to sponsor it. That meant that at every table we got the Dungeon Craft tiles available from 1985 Games to build all of our maps for. And then WizKids lent us all of the miniatures that we would need to run our epic encounters. WizKids actually ended up stopping by during the event to check things out and got to see you flying around with their zombie dragon, which they loved.
Yes, Lord Soth got to guest star as the Lich. And in addition, our great friends at Crown Studios made sure that all the players had a cool swag bag with some extra dice in case they would need it. And our good friend Haas from Dungeon Scribe created magic item cards so that all the players would be able to loot stuff during the games as well. So as you can probably imagine, with all these amazing people contributing to this event, Kelly and I started to feel a lot of the pressure in writing the adventure itself.
We had a lot of fun writing the adventure, but one of the tricky parts is that although Monty and I have written a ton of adventures ourselves, we've never written one that's split into 4 separate tracks that all have to interact with one another. This meant that timing was very important, more important than it usually is at any other D&D game.
When you're playing a game at home, it doesn't matter if things run a little bit long. But at a convention, even though Gen Con gave us a great space to run the event in, we still had to be out of there on time so that another event could use the same space after ours. So we had to make sure that the adventure fit into a 5-hour time window, including setup and a conclusion.
So with that time crunch in place, we knew that we had all the pieces to create something awesome, but the question was, what could we create that fit into this 5-hour window? What's something epic, an adventure that everybody can participate in? And that's when we started thinking of, obviously we've mentioned the Lich on the zombie dragon. So who is this Lich on a zombie dragon? All of the players in our epic were storming a Lich's castle. The Lich, whose soul stone has been separated into 4 separate soul gems that all need to be obtained and shattered at the same time in order to destroy him once and for all.
This meant that basically we would be able to split the 12 tables into 4 different paths or tracks and letting them all have a unique experience, but one that would interweave with one another. And thematically, it meant that each group of 3 tables was basically assaulting a different part of the Lich's castle. The groups on track A were going right for the gatehouse, but the groups on track B were going to go for the cathedral. The groups on track C were going to be going for the towers, while the groups on track B would be sneaking in through the sewers into the dungeons of the Lich's castle, where at the end of each track, the players would have to face down one of the Lich's lieutenants who was guarding the pieces of the Lich's soul gem. And we imagined that at the end of the adventure, all the players would be able to like hold up their hands and clap together at once to mime out destroying the soul gem of the Lich and defeating them once and for all.
So now we had our 4 tracks detailed and designed, but then the next question was, how many encounters do we put in each track? We toyed around with the idea of 3, 4, or 5, and tried to figure out exactly through some playtesting and writing and conceptualizing what would we be able to comfortably fit in a 5-hour window.
So we realized that in the 5-hour window that we had, each encounter would be about an hour long. That would let us do 4 encounters, while also giving time for a break in the middle and a little bit of a buffer time at the beginning and the end for setup and takedown. So that's what we figured out. I made a big spreadsheet that said, okay, we got 12 tables. Every table's going, we got 4 tracks. Every track has 4 encounters. There's going to be boss battles at the end and intros at the beginning. We have to design 16 encounters that are going to feel thematic and interesting for each track to go through.
One of the key components of the D&D Epic is that we wanted the tables to affect one another. So we had to really conceptualize how we were going to do that. One of the most important parts of it was, in fact, the timing. We had broken each track into 4 encounters. We knew that we wanted the first encounter to be pretty straightforward. One of the important parts when you're getting together with a new group of players that you've never played together before, and maybe you're playing a character that you've never played before, you often take maybe the first hour of a D&D game to figure out what's everybody's dynamic, how are we working together as a team, and what the heck can my player even do? That's why the first encounter on every track was a simple, here's the wall of the castle, here's some skeletons or ghouls, you gotta fight them and kill them to move on.
So we made some new stat blocks for the skeletons and ghouls that were guarding the front wall of the castle, and it turned out to be a really good idea to have the first encounter be just a simple slugfest, because it was exactly as Kelly predicted. People were playing their characters for the first time. They got to play level 8 characters, which were pretty strong. And so everybody wanted to get the chance to know the game master, know each other, get to meet each other. And so having this little warm-up or appetizer encounter ended up being perfect for the context of the event.
Now, when we moved on to the second and third encounters, the way that we split this up is that one track, their second encounter would be a puzzle that affected the other tables. This might not be a complicated puzzle. For example, track A needed to dismantle or destroy catapults. These catapults were firing over to track B. Track B, meanwhile, was trying to open the entrance to a secret crypt while getting pummeled by the catapults. What this meant is that one group of players is having damage constantly thrown at them from a source that they have no control over, which puts the agency on the other track to help those tables out. Once they finish that second encounter and move on to the third, those 2 tracks just reverse the roles. Track B now had to end an effect that was doing constant damage to track A. After the second and third encounter, which were mildly complex, we decided that the final encounter should also be relatively simple, if not horrifying. And so we just threw an awesome boss battle into the final encounter. Again, just a showdown. Throw down your fists, throw down your best spells and weapons and everything that you've got, and try to take out the lieutenant of the Lich Lord.
So we designed 4 different lieutenants, a Death Knight, a Death Mage, a Death Priest, and a Death Stalker. So they had very different dynamics, but we ended up building them all in a really cool way with the way their legendary actions worked. They all had neat auras and cool different abilities like smites or special arrows or different spells that they could use. I was really actually proud of these boss monster stat blocks, and they ended up being pretty scary. At the end of the day, a few people did let us know we could have made the encounters a little bit harder, but we weren't sure where to land things with balance. So next time, we're probably going to buff things up a little bit more.
That being said, there were 3 of our DMs that ended up with shirts that they made that said I was TPK'd by Kelly, because in one of the playtest games, my boss, the Death Mage, totally TPK'd my playtest group. So
I don't think we had any actually fatalities on the day though. No, so we might need to power up the Lich for next time. We'll see how that goes next year. But ultimately, for an event like this, it's more important that everyone has a really amazing time.
So in that way, Encounter 2 and 3 both mirrored each other between track A and B and C and D. But this meant that timing was going to be vitally important, because we couldn't have one group of players moving on to their third encounter when their partner table was still on their second.
So this is where our friends Jill, Joe, Kyle, and Shay came into play, acting as our table captains. Each of them was assigned 3 tables, all of the tables that were on a same track. And they were the point of contact for the game masters at those tables, but also for each other. So if one of the game masters was running a table that had the catapult, and that catapult was taken out by the players, they would raise their hand, Kyle would come over, get informed that what had happened, and then Kyle would bring the message over to Joe, who would tell the GM of the paired table what had happened. Now, part of the benefit of this was that we were actually in a pretty tight space, and we were able to physically arrange the tables so that they were pretty close to one another on the day. We weren't sure of that in the planning stages of things, but it worked out really nicely that we had the 12 tables that we could kind of arrange in a cool formation. So it meant that all this communication was pretty tight. Joe, Kyle, Jill, and Shay did a great job managing all the tables and keeping this communication happening.
This meant that the table crashers, myself, Monty, Ginny, Will, and Antonio, got to just get lost in our characters and our roles, crashing all the tables, having a great time, interacting with the players at each table, and making sure that we got to enjoy the games of D&D that were happening with them. Because our table captains were doing such a great job of helping manage the time and the flow of everything, it meant that there were some magical moments had by the table crashers. There were even some brilliant moments where, because Monty, being the only bad guy of the table crashers, was kind of just going to table as he saw fit, there were a few great moments where Monty would crash a table that had another table crasher at it.
We had a great moment too, where we kind of had like a duel.
We were circling each other, like
fun.
throwing insults at one another, and the tables were all just like staring as we gave our like little show of like, so we meet again, Sebastian.
It was really good.
It was so good.
Yeah. You might be wondering how things worked with us as the table crashers, because we realized that we were going to be jumping into combat encounters while they were in progress without knowing exactly how would we need to roll initiative to jump back in. And we tried a couple different things, but eventually what we just settled on was that the table crashers would all have a bunch of homebrew abilities, and they would be able to take one action after each player in turn. And so what this meant was that during the game, I, as the Lich, got to sit down at the table with all the other players and kind of have a one-on-one duel with each player as they gave me their best shot and I hit them back in return. And it was really cool how I came into it being like, okay, I'm going to show up at a table and I'm going to breathe fire on them all and, attack them with the Lich and scare them. But on the day, I ended up doing so many unexpected homebrew ideas and improvising off of what the players were doing. So I had one instance where I came to a table and a player immediately decided to fireball me. And they rolled the worst damage I have ever seen on a fireball. It was 6 1s, a 2, and a 3. And it was so disappointing that I said, "Nah, you're playing with fire, are you? Well, I will give you a choice. You may re-roll the damage on your fireball if you take all the damage yourself." And the player lit up, picked up those dice and rolled a bunch of sixes and ended up knocking out their own wizard. But it was a super memorable moment, and I ended up doing that time and time again at different tables. And of course, the way it worked as the Lich was that I had like 1,000 hit points that I tracked across the entire tables. And so I was also like a super Lich that regenerated immediately if I was taken down. But it worked out that everyone got to feel like they were fighting me. And what we did was we had a bunch of extra miniatures from WizKids. So I tracked how much damage every table did to me, and I would announce, "Hey, this table did 180 damage to the Lich this turn. Can you beat this?" And then the table that did the most damage, which turned out to be the last table I went to, which I think did over 200 damage to me, they got to pick some extra miniatures from WizKids as a bonus prize.
I also found that improv ended up working the best. I had written down 4 or 5 abilities that Sebastian Crow was going to use. And by the second table, I had abandoned that list entirely. There were just things happening. And so being able to respond to those things and realize that as a table crasher, I don't need to follow the rules of D&D. I'm not necessarily only capable of casting Firebolt or Fireball. So there were fun moments like, for example, one table had a warlock who didn't have Devil's Sight, but had darkness, and it cast darkness on a group of enemies to kind of get them out of the way. And I asked her, I said, are you able to see in your own darkness? She said, no. And so I reached into Sebastian's pocket, pulled out an extra pair of his goggles, tossed them to her and said, now you can. And I said, for the next round, until the end of your next turn, you can see in your own darkness. Yeah. And little moments like that really just allowed me to play off of the players at those tables. So it ended up being a ton of fun. And I heard from many of the players of the Epic how much fun they were able to have as well. And that's really what mattered the most is we do realize that when people say we'd love to play D&D with you, there might be a hope there for a very intimate game, but intimate games are hard for us to supply at a convention because how many are we going to run? How many people are we going to get to see? But being able to participate in the Epic really gave us a chance to have that FaceTime and that valuable D&D time with so many people in one game.
It was really heartening too, because Ginny, Will, and Antonio also got to brew up really cool abilities for the characters that they played and had a wonderful time teleporting from table to table, helping them all out with Ginny's potions, Will's hilarious barbarian, and Antonio's amazing tailor character, which I just loved all the abilities they came up with. And it was so cool to see everyone at the tables light up with a chance to meet us. We took a ton of selfies and photos, and one big photo at the end with everybody involved, and had such a wonderful and inspiring time playing a really cool game of Dungeons and Dragons. So many people came up to us afterwards at the Ghostfire gaming booth and let us know that it was the best convention game that they'd ever played.
And that means the world to us. It actually has inspired us. We already have ideas for more epics in the future, and we do plan to bring this event to more conventions. So if you are planning on attending any conventions and you see our names pop up, we might in future years have some epic D&D games to bring to you, and hopefully we will see a bunch of you at them in the future.
Once again, I also just want to take a moment to thank all the amazing people that made that epic experience possible. First, a big thank you to all of our incredible game masters that gave their time to both play the game and organize it with us, play test it, and then run it on the day. It was so much. We gathered together in this Discord chat that we put together just for the event, and I'm so glad that we're keeping it active now because the GMs really went all out for this event and were the front line of making it super memorable for all their players. I also want to thank all of our team from Jill, Joe, Kirsten, Shay, Kyle, Moon, Ian, Tim. You guys really helped put this event together, and we couldn't have done it without you. And of course, to our other YouTubers that we collaborated with on this, Ginny, Will, and Antonio, you were all fantastic. And finally, to all of our project partners that helped support the event at WizKids, Crown Studios, at 1985 Games, and Dungeon Scribe that provided all the cool accessories and everything else, and Gen Con as well. A lot went into putting on an event like this, and it really, really was something special for us to do.
So if you've ever participated in a massive D&D game or hope to participate in one of ours in the future, tell us about that in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible with the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. If it wasn't for our Patreon and our Patreon Discord server, we wouldn't have had the amazing GMs that ran the Epic with us. And so if you enjoy our show and would like to help contribute to our community, please consider becoming a Patreon, get on our Discord. The links are right down below.
And if you want to see us playing D&D, you can check out our actual play in the Worlds of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings on Twitch. You can check out all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we've got plenty more on running the games of D&D right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time
in the dungeon.